上野です。Today のトピックはこれです。今、Let's go to the studio!
Welcome to Error404 TV show. Today we have linguistic expert Dr. Yoshimura from the Education University of Hong Kong to explain these interesting circumstances with us.
Thank you for having me.
Our topic this week focuses on the varieties in English. We have some interesting videos from our dearest audience. So, I will ask you some questions, but first, let's take a look at the videos.
Please call Stella. Ask her to bring these things with her from the store. 6 spoons of fresh snow peas, 5 thick slabs of blue cheese, and maybe a snack for her brother Bob. We also need a small plastic snake and a big toy frog for the kids. She can scoop these things into 3 red bags and we will go meet her Wednesday at the train station.
What language is this?
This is English.
Please call Stella. Ask her to bring these things with her from the store. 6 spoons of fresh snow peas, 5 thick slabs and blue cheese, and maybe a snack for her brother Bob. We also need a small plastic snake and a big toy frog for the kids. She can scoop these things into 3 red bags.
What language is this?
Well, this is English too.
So how are they different?
I don't know. But my friend Dr. Tang will show you more.
Thank you, my colleague. In order to understand the difference between Philippine English and Standard English, we can look into 2 different aspects. 1 grammar aspect, 2 phonology aspect. On the grammar aspect, there are 2 major differences. 1, it is the way they express state. For example, in Standard English, we say general with first. But in Philippine English, they say general with 1. Number 2, there's no distinguish of he and she in Philippine English. For example, they may say, I like this guy. She is so handsome. On phonology aspect, there are several points as well. 1, there's lack of fricative consonants. Instead of pronouncing F, V, Z sound, they pronounce it as P and B sound. For example, instead of saying Filipino, they will say Filipino. For example, instead of saying Victor, they will say Victor. Also, for the TH stopping, they will pronounce it as T and D sound. For example, instead of thick, they will say thick. Instead of thistle, they will say thistle. Instead of these, they will say these. Instead of them, they will say them. Also, there is lack of the phoneme. Instead, they will voice it into S consonants. For example, instead of saying zoo, they will say su. Also, one last thing, there's general absence of schwa sound. Thank you very much.
Just now, we watched a video on people speaking Philippine English and Standard English. I'm aware that there are 2 Filipinos in Hong Kong transiting from speaking Philippine English to its standard counterpart, which is also a common phenomenon in both the Philippines and Hong Kong. So can you give us more insight on this matter?
There's a set of factors that attribute to this phenomenon. First, language attitude, meaning how the language or a variety of language is viewed or what social status or emotion are associated with it. And of course, there are also a set of practical concerns or changes in identity that involve, for example, institutional factors, educational factors, personal and social factors that involve in this phenomenon.
Can you attribute more on how language attitude attributes to the 2 people's transition?
The answer is twofold. First, there is predominantly positive fields associated with Standard English.
Maybe even some Filipinos in Hong Kong who are not privileged to get good education, who are not coming from good education background. They view Filipinos who have standard English as, you know, they're privileged to the extent of like, oh, they're rich, like, you know, they're very snobbish, like they can get whatever they want.
And this phenomenon is associated with the colonial and historical background in the Philippines and also in Hong Kong. And it also has to do with the strong economic and cultural strength of the standard English speaking communities like the US and the UK. And standard English is also associated with a sense of authority and thus distance. On the other hand, there is an ambivalent view towards Philippine English.
And then you see those Filipinos, they go lang kwai, you know, they're trying to stand behind, try to pick up a fight. Oh no, what are you looking at? So I don't get the animosity behind. Like, it's one thing to feel comfortable around your homies, but to give that impression is like giving a bad image for us at the same time.
The views towards Philippine English is very contrasting. On one hand, it is associated with a sense of belonging, making them feel like home. On the other hand, our two participants think that Philippine English is associated with being less intellectual and is very easily associated with crime and nuisance.
Vygotsky's social learning theory suggests learning, particularly language learning, is a social and dynamic process that depends on social and cultural context. And one's perceptions of this context, how would you say this theory is relevant to this exact phenomenon?
Well, that's a very good point. Our discussion can be divided into two dimensions. One, how language attitude plays a role in this transition from Philippine English to standard English. Two, how transition in communities of the two participants play a role.
この番組はご覧のスポンサーの提供でお送りします。
Now, as we have discussed, it is obvious how the polarized language attitude between Philippine English and Standard English result in such a transition. How will you explain this transition in a social and cultural sense?
Language attitude provides them with a drive and an eagerness to transit, and the socio-cultural environment they encounter provides them with modeling and access to standard English, and thus make this transition feasible.
And there are a lot of Filipinos who are trying to change the dialogue, that Filipinos are not just this. Filipinos are also can be people in the professional fields. And I think that that's what I'm doing right now, like as a teacher. Me having a standard English also kind of have that, how do you say, purpose to make not to make sure, but to really change that stereotype that Filipinos are not just, you know, like a certain kind of people, but that we can also teach. But it seems as if that we Filipinos who are trying to make that change here in Hong Kong need to do something with our accent first so that people will hear us. Because like what I said earlier, even for me, when I hear somebody who's speaking in like Philippine English, I might be distracted about how the way they're saying things instead of what it is that they're saying. But I think it's common among the locals to kind of already discriminate. Oh, you have like a different accent. Why should I listen to you?
How would you say the relationship between identity and language?
It's both dynamic and bilateral.
When people ask me where I'm from, I will say I'm from the Philippines, and they say it with pride. But how does that identity affect the way I learned English? Well, as I mentioned way back then, I had an experience where I had quite a few experiences where I was told back in secondary school that I had a Filipino accent, and I don't know what to feel about that. But then I thought that maybe they don't think that it's a good thing. That's why they're telling me that I have a Filipino accent. So, you know, I was an impressionable kid, so that's what I did. I tried my best to not change it, but more of just neutralize it, as what I
Her
said.
identity as a Filipino Hong Konger is associated with her Filipino cultural and linguistic heritage.
So, education, community, and self-identity all interact with one another and contribute to the participants' transition from Philippine English and to Standard English. Will you agree my assumption?
Yes, exactly. We can look at this phenomenon in the lens of Bahama's third space theory, which explains one's linguistic and cultural hybridity as an outcome of different knowledges, discourses, and identities.
So, you're saying their linguistic behavior is different from those native Standard English speakers, and the reason is they have knowledges and identities in both Philippine English and Standard English speaking communities?
Exactly. For example, they code switch back to Philippine English in order to befriend a sense of distance among Philippine English speakers.
Whenever I go back to the Philippines, I try my best not to sound or I try my best not to speak so much of standard English. I'm conscious of doing that because I don't want my family members to think of me as, oh, she's a family member who went outside of the Philippines and sounding like she's all that. I think that if I say, for example, speak in standard English, it kind of creates a distance between my family members and I. And I'm really a family person. I don't want anything to kind of like stop them from talking to me. And I speak Filipino, so that makes it easier for me to like really integrate with my family. But that's something that I think it's interesting to mention because that's like a conscious effort not to sound, let's say, native. And it's always like I'm deciding, oh, how do I want people to think of me? And then as a result of that question, I have to think, oh, which accent am I going to use this time?
Or it can be the other way around, speaking standard English to enhance their identity as an standard English speaker.
Oh, hey, man.
Hey, man.
How are you doing, man?
Yeah,
Good to
how
see
are
you.
you doing?
I'm okay.
What lesson are you taking?
ESL and ICT.
So do you want to go for lunch together?
Yeah,
let's
actually,
go.
I'm done with it. Yeah.
Yeah, let's go.
What do you want to eat?
Nothing. Just want to eat you. Other examples include cup mixing and bilingual cunning jokes.
So, simply speaking, identities and language are in a dynamic relationship, influencing each other. Is that right? So, Dr. Yoshimura, thank you for coming today.
Yeah. My pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you, our host and our dearest guest, Dr. Yoshimura. Here's an overview of what has just been discussed. Identity, that is how the participants view themselves and what communities they are affiliated with, is in a dynamic relationship with their linguistic behavior. Identity changes along with the language or English varieties spoken and vice versa. While it is certain that a rainbow view of languages and English varieties is elementary for a multicultural community, we can hardly deny the fact that Standard English plays a significant role in economics, local public governance, international relationships, and the like. Thus, while it is true that no English variety is a deficit one, Standard English offers its access to professional development. To achieve this end, English teachers' role can be on developing students' language attitude and identity as a Standard English speaker. Under this social-cultural framework, teachers can expose students with more pop cultures from Standard English-speaking communities according to their own interests, building up their identity as an authentic Standard English user. However, it is also the teacher's obligation to keep in mind that this does not make Standard English more superior in the cultural sense, and rooms for students' own English varieties should be reserved, rather than completely eliminated. Thank you. We'll see you tomorrow this time.